Hi everyone, I'm Maria McLachlan, and don't skeptics say the darndest things? When I first got involved in scientific skepticism and campaigning against quackery and anti-vaccine nonsense, there were a few blogs that I followed religiously. One of them was the Quackometer blog by Andy Lewis, and another was a blog called Respectful Insolence by David Gorski. One of those two bloggers is still justified in calling himself a skeptic. The other one tweets as Gorskon. As you can see, he has over 70,000 followers, he is a surgeon and scientist, and he describes himself as a skeptic promoting science and exposing quackery, in spite of which David Gorski takes the position that trans women are women. This is how I know. In October last year, 2021, in an exchange with Katie Montgomery, he tweeted that gender critics are as bad or worse than anti-vaxxers in terms of nastiness and trolling. I wondered then what Gorski would say about the relentless abuse meted out to women by trans activists, which has certainly been worse than anything I've seen from anti-vaxxers, from quacks of any sort, or literally from any other group online. Someone called Gary responded, "I'm new to this issue too, and I see the complete opposite. I see balance and reason from their side." As would anyone who took an objective look, anyone who seriously thinks that opponents of gender ideology are nastier than people like these is willfully blind and an idiot. So the idiot responds, apparently without a trace of irony, quoting a line from one of my favourite songs. It's hard to imagine a more apt description of Gorski himself. Gary comes back with, "Yes, that's the problem maybe, listening to men rather than women." Nice one, Gary. And Gorski says, blah, 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 trans women are women. The end. Now, Gorski is a managing editor of the website called Science-Based Medicine, which describes itself as exploring issues and controversies in the relationship between science and medicine. I have searched this website. I have searched his blog and both his Twitter accounts. He has another one laughingly called Orek Knows. And I could find no explanation as to why he thinks people who are born male and are therefore men can be women. So it seems that Gorski does what quite a number of those who claim to be skeptics do. He applies his skepticism selectively. He ring-fences gender ideology from skeptical inquiry, and he has nailed his colours to the mast in support of a regressive, sexist, homophobic, scientifically unsupportable ideology that is causing real hurt and harm to people. One can only speculate as to why, but one notion I won't entertain is the big pharma shill gambit. I've no time for conspiracy theories. When men of scientific backgrounds who should know better buy into this, or appear to buy into this claptrap, I'm more inclined to think it's for the same reason as other men do. It's about male entitlement and contempt for women, lack of concern for children, and just being a gutless coward. I mean, let's face it, if you have a public profile and many fans or followers, you have to be a person of great strength and courage to stand up to the cult, considering what they are able to dish out. I mean, look at what the hero J.K. Rowling has had to endure. Talking of whom, going back to July 2020, says Gorski, apparently a few skeptics who, or so they claim, previously admired my work are oh so disappointed in me because I responded to J.K. Rowling's transphobic junk science in a snarky, disrespectful manner and because I don't support their nonsense about trans people. I'm going to disregard the transphobic allegation because we all know by now that transphobic means that we disagree that men can be women and vice versa. There is nothing phobic or bigoted about that view. It is an empirical fact, and those who are so intolerant of it that they resort to snark, disrespect, and worse against those who express it are the ones displaying bigotry. But what intrigued me about this tweet from Gorski was that I had never seen JK make any kind of scientific claim, so I looked for anything resembling the exchange he described. And all I could find was this quote tweet of someone showing a screenshot of JK Rowling saying, "Many healthcare professionals are concerned that young people struggling with their mental health are being shunted towards hormones and surgery when this may not be in their best interest." It was retweeted by another American doctor who said, "This is wholly, categorically false." And this, in turn, was tweeted by, quote tweeted, I should say, by Gorski with, "Doctors who actually take care of trans teens say you're full of shit for making this claim." So, no. It behoved Gorski to check whether that other doctor did in fact take care of trans teens, because in that guy's very next tweet he actually admitted that he doesn't. But what really beggars belief is that it didn't occur to either of these two American doctors that J.K. Rowling was talking about what was happening in her own country, the one she lives in, and not their country, even though there is a bit of anecdotal evidence from American kids that contradicts the assertion that this isn't also happening in the US. Who are these many healthcare professionals that Ms. Rowling cites? She's sounding rather Trumpy here, claiming experts back her up but not naming them. And Gorski is sounding more than a bit like a brain-dead quack, refusing to engage like a grown-up politely and directly with the person making the claim and asking for her evidence. And if that was too hard, he would have easily found out what was happening in the UK by use of an internet search engine. It's almost as if he didn't really want to know, those skeptics say. It was quite a big news story in the UK at the time that serious concerns were being expressed by both parents of patients and professional staff at the GIDS, the Gender Identity Development Service at the Tavistock Clinic in North London. A source I can link to below is a very comprehensive piece written in January 2020 by Marcus Evans, who had joined the Tavistock Board of Governors in 2018. I'm going to read a little bit from it now. "Almost as soon as I joined, I was made aware of the growing controversy over GIDS. A letter had come in from a group of parents complaining that their children had been fast-tracked through GIDS without any serious psychological evaluation. Around the same time, Dr. David Bell, a senior consultant at the Tavistock and Portman NHS Trust and a Tavistock governor, was approached by 10 GIDS staff members who had grave ethical concerns similar to those expressed in the parents' letter, including inadequate clinical assessments, patients being pushed through for early medical interventions, and GIDS' failure to stand up to pressure from trans activists. As I discovered, this was not the first time such concerns had been raised. 13 years previously, psychotherapist Susan Evans, who, full disclosure, is my wife, had raised her own concerns about the thoroughness of the assessment process by some staff. And 2 months ago, Dr. Hilary Cass, a retired paediatrician who was commissioned by the NHS to investigate services at the clinic, published an interim report, and it was damning. So Gorski was and is dead wrong, and JK deserves an apology from him, but hey, that's just what someone with integrity would do, so I won't hold my breath. Going back to that tweet in which he falsely accused JK of transphobic junk science, one response he got was from a Rita Rake. "And yet you claim to promote science, not quackery. Believing that men can be women, that people can change sex, and that it's ethical to use unproven medical interventions on children and young people sounds like the very definition of quackery to me. And that seems like a perfectly fair comment to me. It's a challenge. It's direct. It's not snarky or disrespectful. How does Gorski respond? Oh, he blocks her, but not before quote tweeting her in order to flag up what a hero he is and dehumanize her and invite a pile-on from other bullies, which she duly received. What a guy. The deliberate use of dehumanizing language may be a recurrent theme with Gorski, as it is with P.Z. Myers. Going back earlier, I came across this one. The TERFs swarm, not unlike anti-vaxxers. He stopped short of saying the TERFs swarm, not unlike rats, but the suggestion is clear, as is the comparison with anti-science activists, or pro-infectious disease activists, as I call them. And as is the fact that Gorski wouldn't dare to say the same thing about his gender activist mates because their appreciation of him is more important than truth and decency. The reason I became aware of that particular tweet is because Alan Hennis, who, full disclosure, is my husband, drew attention to it at the time. He responded with one word: unbelievable. If all you know of David Gorski is what I've shown in this video so far, you won't find it remotely unbelievable probably, but for those of us who thought he was a scientific skeptic who cared about evidence and who put great time and effort into combating nonsense, it is now hard to reconcile his inexorably dumb comments whose sole purpose, I believe, is to virtue signal to a deeply misogynistic cult in order to keep them on side. I mean, he surely can't be so daft as to really believe what he says to one Molly Myers when she responded to this tweet. As I've been forced to learn over the last 6 to 7 weeks since science-based medicine inadvertently published a positive review of a book full of bad science and conspiracy theories about trans teens, there really is a lot of hate buried under many gender-critical GC arguments. Well, I can't comment on that review or the book in question, which is this one by Abigail Schreier, until I finish reading it. But I will link below to Andy Lewis' blog post on the review Gorski is talking about. Definitely worth a read. But note that Gorski doesn't give a single example of what he's talking about, what he considers gender critical, don't forget the scare quotes, Doc, gender critical arguments that have hate buried beneath them. So Molly Myers, at Molly Stan, says she's not hateful, she just doesn't believe it is healthy for children to think they need to change their body because they are gender non-conforming. Nor does she think it's safe for women and girls to allow any man who says he is a woman into women's single-sex spaces. Could that be a more reasonable comment? Gorski, however, comes back with, and you've just demonstrated what I meant, particularly that second part. Somehow he manages to perceive hate in the idea that women don't want men in our spaces. It's not about women feeling uncomfortable or anxious or unsafe. It's hate. How is it hateful to be concerned with women's safety? Please explain, says Molly. It's demonizing trans women as men who just want to get into women's bathrooms for the purpose of peeping or assault. It's portraying trans men as sexual predators. That's how it's hateful. Stupid man. I say stupid not because he slipped up and called trans-identifying men trans men instead of women, as he stupidly claims to believe them to be. That's an understandable error because, of course, they are men and he knows they are. I say stupid because although I don't believe he really doesn't get the argument here, because nobody is that stupid, but he is deliberately avoiding the argument because he knows he can't win and he wants to keep in with the in crowd. Just my opinion. Molly says, what exactly is hateful about thinking that male sexual predators will pretend to be trans in order to better access victims? You are fear-mongering, implying that an incredibly rare event is actually quite common. You are definitely doing that. Actually, I agree with one part of that. I do think it is rare for men like the wee spa guy to pretend to be trans to get into women's spaces. I think it's more common for men who actually claim to be women the whole time to enter women's spaces seeking sexual gratification. I mean, some of them even boast about it on social media. So I think we should stop making the reasonable and diplomatic and inevitably unappreciated point about how some men will take advantage and pretend to be trans when they're not really, in order to get into our spaces. Let's just point out that straight men who claim to be women all the time are no different from men who don't. Some of them are predators. And she asks him the obvious question, how rare does it need to be to matter to you? How many rapes or assaults are acceptable? And of course, he doesn't answer. Okay, enough. In this video, I've shown only a small sample of David Gorski's Twitter behaviour and not by any means the most ridiculous or hateful stuff he says, nor the fact that he blocked Andy Lewis and reacted to his invitation to have a civil exchange discussing the evidence for puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, etc., by wondering what the hell had happened to the guy he once admired. Isn't that extraordinary? He wonders what happened to the man who stayed skeptical and principled and committed to the truth and concerned about women's rights and children's well-being, but whom he doesn't have the guts to take on, because I believe he knows he's on a hiding to nothing and he's too scared to be treated like he and his cult mates treat J.K. Rowling and other feminists. If there is one lesson that can be drawn from Gorski's behaviour, it is to be very sceptical these days of anyone who claims to be a skeptic, because there is a real danger of the very word skeptic being rendered meaningless. Thanks for watching. Bye.